Before this episode kicks off, just wanted to do a little housekeeping. We're going to do something a little different for our season finale. Uh, this Friday, if you're listening when this releases, September 11th, we are going to do a live stream on Twitch at 8 p.m. You can tune in live at twitch.tv/cocktails and classics, all spelled out. We're going to do something a little different. We're not going to have a film of the week, but we are going to discuss a little bit of everything. So tune in. Might be a little fun, might be a little edgy, but enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Cocktails and Classics. This week we watched This is Spinal Tap. In today's episode we have myself, Zach, Cameron, and Ben. And to kick this thing off and get everybody in the right mood, we're going to talk about this week's cocktail first. So in honor of Spinal Tap this week, we needed a drink that is as rock and roll as the band from the film. So not very rock and roll, actually. But this week we're sipping on the Rock and Rolla from Food and Wine. For this, you're going to need some bourbon, apple juice, lemon juice, maple syrup, allspice liqueur, also known as allspice dram, some Angostura bitters, and some nutmeg if you're feeling a little fancy. Shake it all up. And honestly, this is going to go into my winter cocktail repertoire. This is a really nice drink. I think if it's getting a little cold outside, you can cozy up inside, sip on a couple of these, it warms you up.
I've made two now. We're rolling too deep into the podcast. We'll see if we have to take a break and make a third. This is definitely my favorite drink so far. Dylan he summed it up pretty well. A nice wintry drink. I'm a huge fan of the maple syrup bourbon combo. I might do one of these at least once a week. This is going in my list of favorite drinks.
I will say, ever since we did the Batman episode with the Bruce Wayne, maple syrup and bourbon, I didn't know. And I feel like now I'm part of the group. And
Solid combo.
It's a wonderful group to be a part of.
It basically is Batman and Robin.
Fuck you.
Experiment a little bit, because I'm not a big bourbon guy. And so we've had a couple bourbon drinks. And this is one, you still taste it in there. But I think with the allspice and the syrup and the apple juice, it doesn't get lost in the sauce. But it mixes well enough to become its own thing.
Yeah, I think it's enough of a cocktail where you can use like a shitty bourbon that you have and it'll turn out great. But if you have like a nice bourbon that you want to shine through, just pour a little bit less of the other ingredients or maybe just a little bit more of the bourbon. And it's great that way too.
If you make a rock and rolla, send us a picture on Instagram at Cocktails and Classics Pod and use the hashtag Cocktails and Classics spelled out. We'd love to see what you make and hear your thoughts on it. This week we watched This is Spinal Tap, a 1984 comedy rock mockumentary directed by Rob Reiner. It has a 7.9 out of 11 currently on IMDb, the only movie to do so. That being the 11 out of...
No, but this one goes up to 11.
But why don't you just make 10 higher, Ben?
Well, most movies go up to 10, but this one goes past that to 11 when we really need to push the ratings up there.
Yeah, how else are you going to be England's loudest band?
It's the only way to get it done.
This is Spinal Tap follows the fictional band Spinal Tap, who are one of England's loudest bands, as they tour America with the release of their latest album, Smell the Glove. Starring Rob Reiner as Marty DeBurgi, the director of the film, Michael McKean as David St. Hubbins, Christopher Guest as Nigel Tufnell, Harry Shearer as Derek Smalls, and a lot of like stars hidden within.
Yeah, a lot of little cameos.
Fran Drescher was in there. Billy Crystal is in there. Angelica Houston.
Ed Begley Jr.
Yeah.
Fred Willard's in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Paul
great.
Schaefer.
Yeah.
Dana Carvey, I guess, was a mime waiter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was the other guy? There was another SNL guy that was one of the mimes too.
Billy Crystal was the mime, other one.
I think Billy Crystal was the one that was yelling at Dana Carvey.
Yeah.
I think.
He was the one. Do the bird thing. Do the bird thing.
Did you already mention Fred Willard?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Zach did.
R.I.P.
Zach had to remind me. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed
That's
him
bad.
in there. I was like, oh, I know that guy.
It was on IMDb's top 250 before. It has since fallen off, but is highly regarded as one of the funniest films of all time. It's in the National Film Registry and basically created the mockumentary genre. Cameron, what was your reaction to This Is Spinal Tap?
Well, first, when the band started playing, I learned that Tonight I'm Gonna Rock You Tonight is not a real song by a real band, but it's actually a song by a fake band because that song is in Guitar Hero 2. And I did not know that it was a fake song until today. So I learned that. But other than that, yeah, my main takeaway was that I thought it was really funny, but also I think this honestly kind of started the mockumentary genre, and honestly, without like movies like this, we might not even have like like The Office or like any of those
Borat.
types of shows. Or yeah, Borat.
God.
Or Paranormal Activity?
Well, maybe that one's a little different, but yeah, we might not have some of those that like really well-known kind of versions of this more modern without this movie.
This was also my first time seeing this movie, and I've always heard of it being as this like great film, this funny movie. So I was very excited to watch it for the podcast. I'm hesitant to say I loved it, but I've really enjoyed it. I felt like I was just sitting there with the shit-eating grin the entire time.
Yeah,
at some
I
of the
agree.
bits.
Yeah, it's just funny because at first it was kind of serious, and then as the movie progressed, it just got more and more like insane and like crazy and just really outlandish.
Yeah, this was also my first time watching. I guess it was funny, but not in the way I was expecting it to be funny. Like, I was expecting a lot more, like, high joke per minute, almost kind of like an airplane type vibe where it's just one kind of thing after another. And I wasn't kind of expecting more so the overarching ideas to be where the comedy lies. So this was kind of a different style of comedy than I think what most people are probably used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it really does seem like it's mostly like just a satire on the entire 80s, maybe, I don't know, like 80s music industry as a whole. Because this band has been together since the 60s, and their early starting music sounded like, I don't know, what you might expect the Beatles would kind of sound like. And this band is almost kind of what the Beatles would have been like had they not broken up, and they had stayed together for ever, 20 years.
The
So
Beatles would have found the
before-
11th switch, the 11th gear.
Before you got on the call, Cameron, I said that exact same quote, almost word for word.
Yeah, I figured he heard it and was just repeating it.
No, I
thought,
did not.
I
I
thought he
wasn't
might
there.
have.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, this is Spinal Tap. So I've seen this movie a couple times. I really enjoy it. The guys in the movie actually did play the music. And
I noticed that in the credits.
They actually put out 3 albums, not the 3 that are named in the movie, but they did put out 3 Spinal Tap albums. So you could go listen to those if you were a big fan.
Yeah, I was impressed by the music.
Yeah, I was gonna say, other than the shitty lyrics, obviously, the music actually sounded good. The music that they were playing, the guitars and everything else, actually sounded good. But then obviously the lyrics were outlandishly sexual.
Yeah, this entire movie is just a rip on the rock and roll genre. Every little thing they could parody, they did, and it's like the more you know about little stories and shit that happened in rock and roll, the funnier this movie gets, which makes me kind of worried that this movie will start to lose popularity as it gets older and older. Because a lot of the stuff when I was watching it, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. But then in prepping for the quiz and stuff, I would learn a lot about why they did that sort of thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, now that's actually hilarious.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of like I thought was funny was, well, there were some of them, like a lot of times in scenes they'd like brush stuff off and then like kind of be like, no, it actually is a big deal. I'm actually really mad about that. Especially in the like dressing room when he's really mad about the size of the bread and he's like, no, it's fine, I just don't like it how it this way. No, it's cool. No, actually I'm actually upset about this.
So that is actually making fun of, I believe it was Van Halen.
Van Halen who
that asked to have all the brown M&Ms removed from their M&M bowls. It's stuff like that.
I have heard, though, to their credit, to Van Halen's credit, I've heard that the only reason they included that stuff in their clause was that so they would know when they got to a venue if the venue read over their clause like in fine detail, because a lot of times the rigging and stuff required like high safety and like, you know, very particular things, and so if they did not do the brown M&Ms, then there's a good chance that they missed other stuff as well. Supposedly. I don't know. That's just what I've read or heard or whatever.
Could be true. It might not be, ladies and
They
gentlemen.
also might just be prima donnas, which is also equally probably true.
Read the transcript. Fact check for yourself.
We're like the U.S. government up in here. We don't fact check ourselves. We just throw out our opinions and expect you to believe them as fact.
Speaking of like the overly sexual shit, when he's like sitting on the piano and he's like playing that song.
Yeah.
And Rob Reiner's character is like, oh, that's like really beautiful. That's like not anything you do normally. He's like, oh, it's like my ballad trilogy that I have going on. He's like, oh, what do you call it? Oh, Lick My Love Pump.
He goes on a big monologue about how, yeah, I've always wanted to do this sad ballad in D minor because it just brings people to tears. It's so sad. And then hits you with that.
What's the David's wife, girlfriend is definitely Yoko Ono, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Like she
100%.
seems like she represents him.
Yeah.
Or her, sorry.
Yeah. I will say the other thing I loved is when they're talking about like how like the armadillos in the trousers.
Yeah,
and then
I was
later
just
on
looking at that quote.
later on. No, my favorite part is later on when it leads to them all walking through the metal detector and he has just a cucumber wrapped in foil in his pants.
Which, by the way, that's how you know this movie was made in the 80s. Because if you do that today, you're not getting on your plane.
See, I don't know. I know somebody who had definitely had water in their suitcase going through security, and they ended up getting to their
I
destination.
didn't have it in my pants. That's the difference. I mean,
That's
that
true.
guy didn't have it in his pants.
That's true.
But there was a phallic object also attached to both of those
That's
TSA
true.
hazards.
And the old woman at TSA did not appreciate it at all. She was like 70 plus.
Yeah, I was just looking at that quote, Ben, when they're talking about the album, and they're like, yeah, they didn't like the cover. What? Yeah, it's a woman with a dog collar with an arm pulling on the collar and putting his hand
And the
his
man is
gloved
forcing,
hand.
Under her
forcing her
face?
to smell the glove.
Yeah,
Like,
they're like, we've got armadillos in our trousers. We're scary to women. We intimidate them. That's why our audience is mainly men.
Mainly
Or
not
young
men.
boys.
Not men.
Young
Teenage
boys.
Teenage boys. Sorry. And then they're like the white album cover sold many of copies, and there's nothing on it.
he's like, oh, no, they're saying it's sexist. Yeah, of course it's sexy. No, sexist.
What I love is when they're arguing for the like super offensive album cover, and the manager goes to say something, and the lady just goes, "Well, maybe if their first album sold, we'd be a little more lenient," which just gives you a key on where this movie is heading from jump.
I didn't want to say this, but Kmart and Sears refused to sell this album.
If we're talking about great quotes, I also love when they're sitting there and they get in the giant fight, and the guy leaves. And Ari Shear's character just looks up and goes, "Well, I have just one question. What's that? Are we playing Stonehenge tomorrow?" No, we're not playing Stonehenge
Okay, the
tomorrow.
Stonehenge bit to me was so funny. Where he was like, I want Stonehenge, and he drew it out 18 inches, and then he took it to the guy, and then the guy gave it to that girl, and she's like, here it is, and he's like, oh, this looks great. This will be really great when you blow it up and it's real size, and she's like, well, wait, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, when it's like big, and she's like, no, this is it. You told me 18 inches. This is exactly what you ordered. And then I was like, oh, maybe they'll just discard it. But no, they lower it to the stage while they're performing and then have
Little people.
what's the preferred term now?
Little people.
Little people? I don't want to get
don't know if
canceled
that's
over this
right.
term.
No, I'm
We're
pretty
gonna
sure
get canceled
that's
regardless.
Anyway, they have leprechauns dancing around it. Well, they're dressed in leprechauns.
They are.
I think
They're
they're supposed
dressed
to
in
be dressed
leprechaun
as children.
outfits, I think, right?
No, I think it's when
Yes,
they literally
druid.
say druid children, and you just
Druid
called them
children.
leprechaun.
Okay,
Oh, I
were
thought
in
they were
green,
dressed
were
as
they not?
leprechauns. Yeah, I thought they were like.
I thought they were leprechauns.
green
They were in
overalls
green.
and like the little hat. I was like, oh, those are elves. Oh no, they're leprechauns.
I think they
Anyway.
were supposed to be druid children.
Maybe that's what
Anyway,
druid children look like.
They
I'm
had
not
the
as
small
exposed to
Stonehenge
druid
with
children.
with them dancing around it while the other people performed, and they were just like looking back at it, like, "What the fuck is this?"
Which, of all of the performance failures, was not my favorite. My favorite was
Oh
the one
my
where he
God.
couldn't get out of the
Yeah.
pod.
Yeah.
He's like,
That
he's
was
got the
so
bass
funny.
straight up.
He was just like trying to get out forever, and then the assistant would come out and he tried to like blowtorch it and stuff.
I like the one where he's just like gently pounding on it from the back with a hammer, like not hard enough to do anything, but just kind of like.
And then he finally gets out at the very end of the set, of course.
As they're getting back
Yeah.
in.
And then he tries to get back in, and then
Gets
gets
his arm
caught again.
stuck.
That one was, yeah, it was so funny. He's like playing in the thing, but also banging on it to try and get out.
Another quote that was, it's like in one of the songs, I think it's the one where they're like basically kind of parodying Queen when they're talking about like big bottom girls. and
Big
stuff
Bottom
like
song.
that. Yeah, and it's like the line is big bottom talk about mud flaps. My girls got 'em. That line just cracked me up.
God.
Mud flaps. Ladies, if you're out there and your man refers to anything on you as mud flaps, you can write into the show. We'll be here. You can lean on our shoulders. We'll
back
support you
you
through
up.
that trying time.
We'll back you up on that.
Yeah, it's like the bigger the cushion, the sweeter the pushing. That's what
And
I said.
then when they would perform all these songs, they'd have these like, exaggerated like things on their faces, their tongues out. And then there was the one point where he went on his back on the guitar, but he
He
couldn't,
couldn't
get back
get
up.
up.
So the assistant came out and like twirled him around a little bit and then like got him like
Oh, it was so funny.
stood him back up again.
I think my favorite part about that is what I found so funny is that they made that joke, and then in like 2017, that happened to Gene Simmons at a concert.
Oh my God, really?
He fell backwards, and he had like the high top, like the flat,
Yeah,
or
the platform shoes.
platform shoes on, and he
Yeah.
couldn't get back up. He was just laying on his back.
Oh
Someone
my
had to come
God.
back and grab him and help him up.
Another scenario like that. U2 tried to do something similar with the coming out of the shell, but it was all the bandmates coming out of like this big lemon. This was like late 90s, maybe early 2000s. And they got out of the lemon and then they got back in at the end of the show, but it wouldn't open again. And I guess it was fairly airtight, so the band almost suffocated.
Oh my god.
Oh my
Would have saved
God.
me from downloading that album on my iPhone, but oh my god.
Yeah, that's true. It would have saved me from every time I get in the car, one random song from YouTube plays that I don't want.
It you know what that sounds like? That sounds like a great way that one of the Spinal Tap drummers would have died.
Would have died. Well, you see, spontaneous combustion happens a lot, but it's just not reported that much.
I love the
just such a
gardening incident
meme.
one. He's like, he died in
Yeah.
a bizarre gardening incident. Authorities
The
said,
authorities
best leave that one unsolved.
They had what, 3 drummers die on them, and then the fourth at the very end of the movie, the fourth gets replaced, and they just like the title card underneath him is like new drummer or whatever.
Yeah.
I also love when he's reading the reviews on his albums on the Spinal Tap albums, and the one
Yeah.
is like, this pretentious, ponderous collection of religious rock psalms is enough to prompt the question, what day did Lord create Spinal Tap? And couldn't he have rested that day too?
Well, I love like when he's reading them off. I feel like they almost break character.
Yeah.
Because they kind of just laugh at him too. They're like, "Oh, that's pretty good." It's like shark sandwich, more like shit sandwich.
2 words. Shit sandwich. God.
Yeah, and I love that they call back to those things too. Like with the drummer when he's in the bathtub and Marty's like asking him, he's like, "Are you afraid for your life with the history of Spinal Tap drummers?"
And he's like, no, I mean, you know,
the
statistically,
odds.
I'll be all right.
The law of averages says I'll be fine.
So on average, I probably will be okay.
I think we passed the law of averages when the second drummer died.
Right.
I don't know.
That is such a weird theme in like bands. and
Rock
stuff.
music.
Oh,
Yeah,
drummers dying?
Well, drummers or like musicians just like dying. I feel like it happens a lot.
Got the 27 club.
Or like
Yeah,
one person
drugs will do that.
Like I know Metallica, like they had their bassist die and then another one left, and like, you know, I think they're on their like 3rd or 4th one by now.
I love when they go to play for the military. Like, oh, play some slow songs for us. And they play the Sex Farm.
I will say I did feel pretty bad for them at like that point in the movie because like, you know, it was funny that like they would just kind of go to a place and they're like, oh, our gig got canceled. What? Yeah, it's canceled. Okay. But then like, you know, when the manager quits, this other random lady's basically just like booking them for like small gigs of like 10 people.
Puppet show and Spinal Tap.
Oh, I wanted them to put Spinal Tap first.
But you guys have great sized dressing. Oh, bigger dressing rooms than the puppets.
Yeah, and then they're like, all right, so what are we going to play? Because we don't have a second guitarist. All right, we're going to play the freeform jazz.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like thumbs downing
Yeah.
in the crowd. They all sit down.
God, yeah. It's interesting because, yeah, I feel like, I mean, it's definitely satire, but it definitely does show, like, you know, the kind of waning of, like, music careers, especially among the rock groups that stay together for a long time, but, like, don't really, like, obviously, like, bands like the Rolling Stones, I think, are still, like, relatively popular, but, you know, really any of those 80s bands, like, you know, Journey or whatever, like it's just like, oh, they had, you know, a couple good songs and now they're just kind of touring around and the only people that they can really get to their shows are like, you know,
Moms.
people who were around when their music originally came out in the 80s.
Well, I think that's pretty much the Rolling Stones as well.
I
think majority of their
maybe.
audience would be people who
I think the
grew
Rolling
up on
Stones
music.
and the Beatles have found a new audience. The issue is
Yeah.
the Beatles are dead.
Yeah.
Well,
Half of them.
everybody but Ringo, I think.
Like, I mean, like, I would go to a Rolling
they're not
Stones
gonna play
concert,
together.
but I wouldn't go to, like,
Are you
a
making a
Rat
Paul
concert.
Are you
you know
making
what
a
I mean?
Paul died before Abbey Road joke, Dylan?
Never.
Way to make such a deep cut.
He's
joke.
dead. That's why
Just
his
a
shoes are off
throwaway
on the
deep
Abbey
cut.
Road cover, okay? Signaling that he's dead and it's a body double.
It's like Avril Lavigne. They took it from Avril Lavigne
Wait, what?
because she got Lyme disease and died. You don't know about that? Yeah,
What?
Avril
No.
Lavigne died maybe 10 years ago. She died of Lyme disease, and now there's a body double floating around. That's why she hasn't made any new music.
What's the point if you're not making new
wasn't
music?
wasn't she the one that was married to the fucking dude from Nickelback?
Yeah, the ramen guy.
Yeah, Chad Kroger or whatever.
Yep.
his
I
name
gotta say, if Paul McCartney is a body double and has been a body double this whole time, frankly, his body double has actually been way more successful musically than he was before then.
Yeah, he got
But
on
what if they
a,
just
he got
had
on a
all
song
this-
with President Yeezy. So I mean, he's
my God.
definitely a highlight of his career.
I was gonna say, what if they just had all this back catalog like Beatles music and they're just using that?
Well, he only produced, like, Abbey Road was, like, one of their last couple albums. But Paul McCartney had, like, a huge solo career, and then with Wings, and, you know. And he
Okay.
didn't get assassinated. You know, he's living large.
We're gonna have so much rock and roll trivia, or just fun facts and content.
Yeah.
Guys, how did we talk about quotes and not mention Money Talks and bullshit walks.
Yeah.
I feel
I thought
like
you were gonna say mime is money.
I
was going to
also
say,
do love
give me
that
money.
quote. Mime is money.
My favorite album review hasn't been read yet, but it uses an outdated word.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I also wanted to talk about the one where they talk to the hotel receptionist and they say, I'm not talking to this twisted fruit anymore. And he goes,
God.
I'm
exactly how God made me.
sir."
It's like, you stand up for yourself.
I love that bit. He's like, yeah, you said you wanted 7 suites on one floor, but we got 1 suite on the 7th floor. It's like, how are we supposed to fit 14 people on one bed?
He's like, oh, don't tempt me.
Oh, there's David being interviewed by Rob Reiner, and he's like, so David St. Hubbins, I admit I've never heard anybody with that name. He's like, that's an unusual name. He was an unusual saint. He's not a very well-known saint. Oh, there was a St. Hubbins? Yeah. He was the patron saint of quality footwear. with a just deadpan. All these guys deliver it so perfectly. That is something I think this movie does phenomenally. Is I completely understand why people thought it was a real documentary, because they play it off so well, like it's an actual documentary of just a dumb band.
I mean, it's totally believable. Like, their act is totally believable. If you told me this was a real band, I would have probably believed you, just because it's like, it's satire, but it's not that outrageous.
I would have
honestly.
immediately pointed to their song being on Guitar Hero, and you'd have been like, "Oh yeah, that's real."
Yeah.
I think the music really enhances that like mockumentary aspect, because like if you look at movies like I'm gonna say Blair Witch Project and like Paranormal Activity, because it's the same genre, it plays itself as a documentary, but I think the music, I think it adds that extra fact, because you know it's their voice and you know it's them actually like playing, it looks like. So I think that just adds that documentary aspect to make it more believable, and just ups that little level there. Plus the fact that I think, who was it, Zach or Ben said that there was 3 other albums.
Yeah, 3 actual Spinal Tap albums.
Could we just give a quick shout out to the fact that the film was improv and done so straight-laced?
Yeah.
Like, that's fucking impressive.
I want to know how many takes it took, because I feel like I would just bust out laughing at most of the parts.
I wonder if that's why, like, especially when they do the reviews, that they just burst out laughing. Like, Rob Reiner is just like, sure.
There's no way
sandwich.
we're getting through this.
More like shit sandwich. And they're sitting there like, the first time they're hearing this, trying not to lose it.
I think they did a pretty good job for it being all ad-libbed.
Yeah, once again, I think that adds to that mockumentary aspect and really just kind of like ups it, because it feels like them really in the character. It's very method in a sense. So this week's podcast is brought to you by Surfside Sips. They make high-impact glass straws. They're a family-owned company. And what's better than saving the turds, you know?
The turds?
The turds.
You know, I'm one of those people who hates using paper straws. Paper straws fucking
Paper straws suck.
I love
the worst
what
solution.
they do. I love that we're minimizing the use of plastic straws. I enjoy that. Paper straws suck ass.
They suck. They're the worst possible solution, because turns out, guess what? Paper and water don't fucking mix, okay? I don't know who came up with it, but it doesn't work. Even though they put coating on it to try and help, it doesn't work. It just gets soggy and you end up throwing it away anyway, and that's just more waste. And so,
But you know what doesn't get soggy? Glass.
yeah.
Glass straws from Surfside Sips. And if you want to get some glass straws from Surfside Sips, you can use coupon code cocktails and classics spelled out. That's cocktails AND classics for 20% off your order.
And if you're looking for a business to support during this time, seems like a good idea. Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. But essentially what it is every month you get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from their monthly selection. It's So, Dylan and Zach, what are your experiences with Audible?
So, working from home nowadays, I recently used Audible to rip through one of my favorite book series. It's always great to go back and revisit some of your favorites.
And since we've recently done From Russia with Love, you could check out some of Ian Fleming's books on Audible. They have Dan Stevens, Toby Stevens, Damian Lewis, many great narrators. Read through Diamonds Are Forever, From Russia with Love, Live and Let Die. So maybe you want to get into the James Bond novels as well as the movies.
To start your free 30-day trial, go to audibletrial.com/cocktails and classics, all lowercase. Again, that's audible.com/cocktails, AND classics. After your free trial is up, it costs $14.95 per month. However, there are no commitments, and if you can't decide what to listen to, that's okay. You can roll your credits over up to 1 year.
A little bit of a tradition around here is Zach takes over and puts us through a trivia quiz. Zach, take it away.
Thanks, Dylan. It's never the most fun when we have a podcast member down for the week, when Carlos is missing or when anybody's missing. But the bright side is it does give Dylan that much better of a shot to win a quiz.
Gives Dylan that much more hope to blow it in the end on the last question.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was pretty sad last week.
So question number 1. During one of Nigel's guitar solos, he pulls out a violin and uses it to strum his guitar strings, which is an odd callback to an iconic guitar solo where a guitarist used a violin bow during his solo. Which guitarist was that? A. Jimmy Page, B. Eddie Van Halen, or C. Jimi Hendrix?
I feel like it's not Hendrix. I could see Van Halen or Page doing this.
I tried so hard to come up with all 3 Jimmys.
My answer's gonna be Jimmy Page.
I'm also gonna say Jimmy Page.
Yeah, it was Jimmy Page.
You boys don't understand. I am giving you softballs because I have so many good questions. I want to get to all of them.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
makes sense.
I
makes
just
sense.
Led Zeppelin's like the only band with strings, really. So
I mean, I would not. If the answer was,
I named 3 guitar players.
if the answer was Van Halen, I would have believed it. But
well, no, I mean like in their music though. I feel
Yeah.
like Led Zeppelin's like the only one with like
that's
real string.
no,
in it.
that's
Oh,
true.
like an
Yeah,
orchestral
no, that's
string.
true. But
Gotcha.
if fucking Eddie Van Halen walked out with a goddamn like bow in his hand, that
Okay, you can say the same thing for Jimi Hendrix. He played
Yeah.
it with his fucking teeth.
I mean, yeah, but I don't think. But he's
Hendrix
not.
lit his guitar on fire and sat there and prayed over it too. Like,
Yeah, but that's
they
a
all
little
do
different.
crazy shit.
Yeah, I just don't remember. I feel like I would have known if Jimi Hendrix did that. I feel like I would have known that one.
You a big Jimi Hendrix guy?
Big Hendrix fan.
I like Jimi Hendrix. I don't know. I
Big
don't-
Hendrix
too.
history.
I know more about him, I think, than fucking Page.
All right, well, let's see how Cameron's modern history is. How well do you know the modern shit? By the way, we do have a 3-way tie with 1 point. It was Jimmy
Okay,
Page.
thank you.
If we missed on that, it was definitely Jimmy Page. Question number 2. The Curse of the Spinal Tap Drummer was a major influence on which of the following movie series? A. Harry Potter, B. The Avengers, or C. The Pirates of the Caribbean?
I mean, I'm gonna say Pirates of the Caribbean. I guess. I vaguely recall that being a thing, but I don't know. It's the only one that makes sense to me.
Ben, do you know?
At least I have a reasonable guess.
I do too.
Why don't you just both answer, and then you can give your reasoning after you both
right.
answer.
Okay. Harry Potter.
Same. Harry Potter,
Let me hear the reasoning.
because the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, it leaves
Yeah,
every
there's
year.
a different teacher
Oh.
every movie.
That is
Wow.
100% it. J.K. Rowling came out in like 2010 and did an interview, and she was like, yeah, no, like, it's not the reason people keep leaving, but I thought it was so cool when Spinal Tap had so many drummers that I was like, what if we had a position at Hogwarts where it changed every year?
Yeah, I'm not a big Harry Potter person, but that is something I 100% noticed right away. It was like, why is it every movie there's a new There's a new teacher.
And it's
That
always
seems
like
weird.
the almost bad guy or sometimes
Yeah.
the bad guy. They should really just do a better
Yeah.
job interviewing for that spot.
Bad guy adjacent.
Well, it
at-
is
at
Defense Against the
least.
Dark Arts, right?
Yeah, I guess
It
they're
kind of
sorta
attracts those
edgy.
types of people.
All right, guys, we have a two-way tie between Ben and Dylan.
I'll come back on this one.
Question number 3. It's been a while since I've had a real grim trivia question, maybe going back to the Heathers episode. So let's kick off question number 3. Which one of the following bands did not have a drummer die due to a bizarre gardening accident after the release of Spinal Tap? Was it
Good.
A?
Wait, what?
Which one of the following bands
Did not have.
did not have a drummer die due to a bizarre gardening accident after the release of Spinal Tap?
What?
Is it A, Toto, B, Pantera, or C, ABBA?
You're saying 2 of these bands had a drummer die due to a gardening accident?
After 1984, yes.
Oh my god.
All right. Well, I'm wondering if like gardening accident is just like a police thing they put on there. That's like, yeah.
I have
Like
the
some-
stories for both.
Oh, okay.
They seemed pretty legitimate.
I'm gonna give my answer last since I am in last.
Oh,
I'm gonna say ABBA.
I was also gonna say ABBA. Damn it, Dylan. You
I mean,
monster.
you can.
Nobody's stopping you.
Uh,
You just got to make a stand.
Yeah.
I'm also gonna say ABBA because they seem like the oldest band, so it seems like if someone of their in the group would have died, it might have been before the movie came out.
I guess
Zach's playing us.
I'm gonna say Pantera just because I feel like the type. I don't know. They don't seem like the gardening type to me, but
I think Pantera did have a member die though.
Pantera
mean-
doesn't seem like the gardening type to you.
I mean, if you listen to their music at all, they're not really like frolicking through the daisies, if you know what I mean.
Well, let me tell you.
The Cowboys from Hell are not frolicking through the daisies.
All right, so Cameron, I have good news and bad news for you.
Okay.
Pantera did have a drummer die post 1984.
But it wasn't due to
it
gardening?
was not due to a gardening accident.
Yeah.
So
I
we have a
told you they're not
three-way tie at
gardeners.
2 points. So Toto and ABBA, yes, each had a drummer die due to a gardening accident. The drummer of Toto was found in their garage with an open can of insecticide that the police deduced they actually ended up inhaling too much of, fell down and cracked their head open. And the drummer of ABBA was actually carrying some things out to their garden, tripped and fell, put their head through their glass garden door, and cut their throat on the shard of glass.
Oh my god.
Jesus.
So we have a three-way tie.
Boo.
Yes.
I actually have 2 tiebreakers.
Wait, how'd the Pantera drummer die, did you say?
The Pantera drummer died, I believe, choked on their own vomit.
He
Don't
choked
quote me
on
on that.
someo's vomit. We don't really know who.
They
You
can't determine who
You
it
can't
is.
dust for vomit.
You can't dust for vomit.
Tie-breaking question. Closest without going over our traditional format at this point. How many drummers of Spinal Tap have died?
4. What'd you guys say?
Uh-oh. I'm gonna say 4.
I said 3. One mysteriously disappeared. They didn't say if he died or not. He just mysteriously disappeared.
Guys, we're still tied. Unfortunately, I have to give the tie to Dylan and Cam, but you
Nice.
guys are obnoxiously off. In total,
Really?
37 people have been in the band over the years.
Oh, that's
excluding
right.
the 2 original members, a keyboard player, and the original and current bass players. That means the band has had 32 different drummers who have inexplicably died.
Yeah. I forgot about that part where he said that there have been 37 members in the band. Oh, yeah. They only covered 3 deaths or disappearances or whatever.
Yeah, I think 3 or maybe 4 died or disappeared during the movie.
Yeah. They mentioned 3 and then the 4th obviously was gone at the end.
Well, I know, but they said that. I know they had said that the 3 that died, but the one they said just mysteriously disappeared. I didn't realize they said they'd only had however many keyboards and bassists, though. I do remember them saying they had 37 members, but
So you feel silly. So I believe it was Ben that mentioned most of the lines in the movie were actually ad-libbed. which resulted in a ton of extra filming having to be done. There were so many different cuts of this movie that were made before the final cut was produced. But what is the length of the longest cut in minutes? Closest without going over.
The longest cut in minutes. All right. I got a number in my head.
Same.
All right. So I'll say 160 minutes.
I'm gonna say 86.
You think this is the longest cut?
Well, the movie was 82, I think. So
For an extra 4 minutes?
yeah, but it's closest without going over.
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm just
true.
gonna undershoot.
Undershoot a lot, yeah.
I'm playing the
I went for a big
Price is
number.
Right's game.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dylan plays the game. He also loses the game.
Yes! Oh my god.
The longest cut of this movie, and you can find it out there on the internet, it's around, is 4 hours and 30 minutes long.
Oh my god.
There's an entire second plot where so you guys notice throughout the movie there's some scenes where the bandmates have like obvious
Yes.
cold sores everywhere.
Yeah. I
That's
noticed that.
explained in the 4.5 hour long version, where there's an entire second plot about how the guys go on tour with this band, an all female rock group that opens for them, and they all end up sleeping with the lead singer, who gives them all herpes, and then they all slowly discover that they all got herpes from the same person.
Oh my god. Wow.
I
4.5
just-
hours.
I don't understand why you would ever cut it that long because you know it's never gonna see the light of day.
Yeah.
Well, in total, there was about 100 hours of footage for this movie.
Jesus.
Wow.
So 100 hours, they took 4.5% of it.
And then the final cut was 83 minutes or whatever you said. Wow.
Yep.
Literally less than an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So
Well, I will happily take the L on that one because
That's absurd.
even a fucking 108-minute cut is way too long.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think they filmed 100 hours for Lord of the Rings, the director's cuts, but classic Dylan, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Shout out to Cameron for another win. Seems like it's every week. We need to come up with a new premise for the podcast.
Those of us who have seen it, Zach,
I'm here.
wrote down our rating based off memory and nostalgia. Now I want to know if your rating has changed or not, and then we'll give you our first impressions.
So here I am. I will tell you, my rating did not change.
Here I am.
Once again. I'm torn into pieces. 7 of them in particular. I gave this movie a 7 going in, and I'm going to give it a 7 coming out. This is a movie that I think is extremely funny. It is done remarkably well. So well that you have to remind yourself that this is not a documentary. This is not a real band. You get lost so easily in like, oh yeah, these are just a couple guys that are just kind of, dumb, maybe a little bit of drugs in their life, and they just do rock shows. They're at the tail end of their career. It's so believable and it's so funny. I do have a concern with the movie that I think as time goes on, it's not going to age very well. Not that the humor is offensive or anything, because I think that holds up pretty well, other than the few parts we discussed. But I think a lot of the humor comes from the parody of a genre that people are losing, maybe not interest in, but knowledge of. Like the Tom Petty thing we talked about, the gardening incidents, things like that. I think people, like even myself, I had to look up a ton of that stuff. And once I did, it was more of a retrospective, going back to the movie and going, oh yeah, they poked fun at that. There's some things that I think will remain obvious, poking fun at some Queen songs and stuff like that. But there's the other subtle things that I think are the reason people in the mid to late 80s would give this like a 10 out of 10, gives it the reputation it has, but I think that'll come down over time.
I am also going to give this a 7 out of 10. Leading with my rating, I guess. But I do think this is a solid film. I think it's funny. And like we've said before, I don't think you're going to laugh out loud a bunch. I think it's a funny movie, and it may not be everyone's cup of tea comedy, because it is kind of cringe humor at times. It's very deadpan, and you kind of have to like follow along if you want to get the joke. I feel like this isn't one where you could like kind of zone out come back and it's like somebody teabagging a drum set, like Step Brothers. Like I think you have to be active watching it, listening, to get some of the subtle jokes that are in there. But I think it's really well done, and to see that like this is 1984 and the birth of mockumentary cinema, which something I really enjoy. I do think it is like a significant film that people should watch.
I think my rating and everything going into this film was hurt by the fact that I'd heard so much about this movie. Because I'd heard about how funny it was, and I'd heard everything. I guess I was expecting more laugh a minute than more kind of like the every once in a while going like, heh, or kind of like I enjoyed it, but it wasn't just what I was expecting it to be. I appreciated the little offhand jokes, the I Love Lucy joke. That was clever. Knowing that the movie was mostly improv, makes it so much more impressive to me. Just knowing like how hard doing anything improv off the top of your head can be, and to see someone do an entire movie and it be as good as it is. But overall, I feel like I watched the movie and was just kind of like, man, I think this one was a little overhyped. I only gave this one a 5.5 out of 10. It's one that I guess in the future I would like to rewatch just to try and catch some more of the, some of the jokes that are kind of mentioned like offhand, kind of throwaway lines that would actually be pretty good. But overall, it just wasn't my thing.
I really liked the movie. Like you guys said, it wasn't like laugh out loud funny, but it was more satire funny, where you kind of appreciated the humor in like the situations and the things that they made fun of. And if you like the music from that era and you like kind of know, I think like Zach said, like kind of some of the like crazy rock stories behind what they did, it makes the movie funnier. So I thought that was good. I thought the satire was really good because it was pretty subtle, obviously, except for some of the like very over the top stuff. But like them getting upset in their dressing room, or them having fits about stuff, or even like, the trope of like the lead singer's girl like kind of taking over and like causing a rift and stuff. Kind of satirizing. Is that how you say that one?
Yeah, sure.
Making fun of, I'll say that. Kind of making fun of the typical 80s rock themes. And so I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I thought it was enjoyable. Maybe in a while it won't make as much sense as we get further away from this era in time, but I thought it was good. And also there were still, even though I think it's like mostly heavy satire humor, there were still a lot of like one-liners and quips and like stuff like that still like provided some laughs, like chuckles, that kind of stuff.
If you enjoyed this, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Check out our Instagram at Cocktails and Classics Pod and use the hashtag Cocktails and Classics to send us your movie and drink recommendations. Share us with your friends, and as always, watch responsibly.